The revelation in Egypt. As you look at the story of the Exodus, many of us are familiar with the story of the children of Israel's exodus out of Egypt. But at a closer look, we could see that this whole story is about God's judgment against idolatry. As we look at the idea of idolatry and what it means and the false gods associated with idolatry, we will get a more clear picture on God's divine justice and why he judged them so harshly and what is to come upon the world as this idolatry continues to pervade society. We will see that the future showdown in the book of Revelation is a continuation of the idolatry and the judgment of the false gods that we saw in the book of Exodus. So we're going to look at the significance of the symbol and the spiritual corruption of the idolatrous gods of Egypt, and we will culminate with the book of Revelation, where we will look at the final judgment and how God eclipsed it all with his triumphant victory. When we look at Exodus 12 verse 12, it reads, "For I will pass through the land of Egypt this night, and will smite all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, both man and beast, and against all the gods of Egypt I will execute judgment. I am God." So we could clearly see that God, throughout the book of Exodus, God continues to make this one profession so that they will know that I am God. Not just the Egyptians will know that God is God, but the surrounding nations as well as the Israelites. So for this entire duration, as we look through the book of Exodus and we read the book of Exodus, it is the continued profession that God says he is God, and for the world to see that he is the Lord. And so as we see this profession that God is God, we also know that God is a jealous God, and he is the only God. He is the only true God. But to understand the true nature of God, we have to understand what took place in Egypt and what exactly is idolatry, and why is idolatry so abhorrent to God. To look at idolatry and to understand idolatry, we're going to be exploring a different book today. The book is called The Wisdom of Solomon. The Wisdom of Solomon was actually part of the Bible, the original King James Version of the Bible translation from the 1600s. But because of some administrative issues, i.e. missionaries who wanted to share the gospel with the world thought that there were books included in the Bible that were not necessarily essential for salvation, and they took it upon themselves to delete it. Some of these books are known today as the Apocrypha. One of those books is The Wisdom of Solomon. This book was, again, originally a part of the King James Version of the Bible as it was originally translated in the 1600s, and was excluded for administrative purposes only, i.e. a more convenient and slender abridged text for them to transport, print, and travel with. In looking at the Wisdom of Solomon, we're going to be looking at chapters 14 of the Wisdom of Solomon and several verses in chapter 13. But let's first look at chapter 14, verses 8 through 14. And it reads, "But that which is made with hands is cursed, as well it as he that made it. He because he made it, and it because being corruptible it was called a god. For the ungodly and the ungodliness are both alike hateful unto God. For that which is made shall be punished together with him that made it. Therefore, even upon the idols of the Gentiles shall there be a visitation, because in the creature of God they are become an abomination, and stumbling blocks to the souls of men, and a snare to the feet of the unwise." So from this text, we can see that idolatry is a curse upon the idol itself and upon the idol maker. Idols are stumbling blocks that lead to spiritual downfall, and that the origin of idolatry is spiritual fornication. The Wisdom of Solomon, verse 13, mainly verses 1 through 5, I will not read it, but it talks about the ignorance of mankind in recognizing God's true nature and his true power. Because the writer goes on to talk about how the observer, mankind, observes nature, the fire, the wind, the stars, and see the beauty and the power behind this creation, but not recognizing that the force behind the creation is greater than the creation itself. And so the writer goes on to say, if the beauty of the created thing is astounding, can we imagine how much greater is the Creator's beauty? In looking at Wisdom chapter 13, verse 7 through 9, it reads, "For being conversant in his works, they search diligently, and believe their sight, because the things are beautiful that are seen. Howbeit neither are they to be pardoned, for if they were able to know so much that they could aim at the world, how did they not sooner find out the Lord thereof?" So the writer goes on to say that if the observer, humankind, in looking at the creation, sees the beauty in the creation, how did they miss seeing God? And this is not only in the Wisdom of Solomon. When we look at the book of Psalms, the psalmist in chapter 19, verses 1 through 4, declares that the heavens declare the glory of God, and that the firmament showeth his handiwork. It says, day unto day uttereth knowledge, and night unto night, day unto day utters speech, night unto night reveals knowledge. There is no speech nor language where their voice is not heard. Their line is gone out through all the earth, their words to the end of the world. In them he has set the tabernacle for the sun. So we see here in the psalm, the psalmist is telling us that the heavens is declaring the glory of God, that nature is evidence of the divine craftsmanship, that the universe testifies of God's created powers. And again, going back to the writer of the book of Wisdom, the writer says, how then, seeing all this beauty, beholding all this beauty, how could you not know that there is a creator behind this wonderful creation? But Paul hits it right out of the park. He hits it dead on the nail, because Paul just comes right out and addresses the point very succinctly. We are going to look at Romans chapter 1, and I'm going to read verses 18 through 25. He says, "For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men, who suppress the truth in unrighteousness, because what may be known of God is manifest in them, for God has shown it to them. For since the creation of the world, his invisible attributes are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even his eternal power and Godhead, so that they are without excuse. Because although they knew God, they did not glorify him as God, nor were thankful, but became futile in their thoughts, and their foolish hearts were darkened. Professing to be wise, they became fools, and changed the glory of the incorruptible God into an image made like corruptible man, and birds, and four-footed animals, and creeping things." And so Paul just goes right in and he tells us, he said, listen, you guys, when we look at this, you have all the knowledge. The truth is right before you. It is nothing but the wickedness of your heart that has made you choose to reject the glory of God and the divine, and choose instead to worship the creation. It's like the writer in the book of Wisdom says, we are without excuse. It's what Paul says. We are without excuse. He says the visible things are testifying about the things that are invisible. We are seeing enough evidence around us in nation and the creation to know that these objects and these things did not come about in and of themselves. Neither are they sustaining themselves. So they are not worthy of worship. The only one who is worthy of worship is God himself. And so we see that the similar things were occurring in Egypt at the time of the Exodus, where they were worshiping the Nile, they were worshiping frogs, they were worshiping the wind and various elements of the earth. And God said, these things that are being created, you have now corrupted the order of this world and invited an unholy presence through your worship of these things. And God said, I will judge them, because it is now, he said, I am now going to turn you over to your wickedness and then judge you. We can see that this continues even through our day and age, that this idea of idolatry and creating these things and these images and worshiping the created things instead of the creator is nothing but man's desire to rule and control his own self and his own future. Because in creating idols, man is now attempting to make God in his own image, in an image that is more convenient. As opposed to worshiping the true and living God, man deems that to be so inconvenient to worship God as God exists. Man deems it so inconvenient to worship God as he is enumerated and outlined for us in the Word of God. So man says, I'm going to create an alternate universe for myself, and I'm going to create God in my image, or in the image that is more pleasing, more convenient, and more satisfactory to me. And for that, God says, fine, have it your way. But guess what? I am going to judge you, and I'm going to judge your idols. And we saw that take place in the book of Exodus, where God came in and he judged the idols through the 10 plagues. And then he judged the people and ultimately destroyed them and their kingdom. We will see this played out again in the book of Revelation. I am just going to give you a little highlight. But in the book of Revelation, chapter 13, we see what is called the beast. There are 3 characters in Revelation chapter 13. We see the beast. We see 2 beasts. The first beast that comes out of the earth, the second beast that comes out of the sea, and we see the dragon. And all these images, again, are man's attempt to do away with God and create gods for themselves. I read some of Revelation 13. Then I stood, reading verses 1 through 6. Then I stood on the sand of the sea and saw a beast rising out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and on his horns were 10 crowns, and on his heads a blasphemous name. Skipping down to verse 5 and 6. And the beast was given a mouth speaking great things and blasphemy, and he was given authority to continue for 42 months. Then he opened his mouth in blasphemy against God, to blaspheme his name, his tabernacle, and those who dwell in heaven. The whole idea behind idolatry and idol worship is to blaspheme God. And we see this in the book of Revelation. Revelation chapter 13, 8 says, all who dwell on the earth will worship him, meaning the beast, whose names have not been written in the book of life of the Lamb, slain before the foundation of the world. So for all those who have not surrendered their lives to the Lord, and their names are not written in the Lamb book of life, they will worship the beast and the image of the beast. And let's get down there to the image of the beast. So in Revelation 13:11, it reads, Then I saw another beast coming out of the earth, and he had 2 horns like a lamb and spoke like a dragon. And he exercised all the authority of the first beast in his presence, and caused the earth and those who dwell in it to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed. Skipping to verse 14. And he, the second beast, deceives those who dwell on the earth by those signs which he was granted to do in the sight of the beast, telling those who dwell on the earth to make an image to the beast, who was wounded by the sword and lived. He was granted power to give breath to the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak and cause as many as would not worship the image of the beast to be killed. So we see the ultimate manifestation of idolatry will be these beasts coming out of the earth, coming out of the sea, where they will actually forge an image of the beast and give life to the beast and voice to the image of the beast, and this image will speak. And all mankind will be called upon to worship this image, and at the fate of death. Meaning, if you don't worship the image of the beast, you're going to die. And we're going to see that these image and false gods are given power. We know that the power is demonic, much like what we saw in the book of Exodus, where Pharaoh's magician were able to imitate some of the miracles that were being worked, as they call it, with secret magic. Well, we know just like Pharaoh's magician ran out of secret magic, we know in the end time, the beast, the first beast, the second beast, and the dragon, they will all be overthrown by the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. So when we look at this pattern of idolatry and the judgment in Egypt, it continues throughout history. And it will culminate in the book of Revelation, where God himself will dethrone all authority and power that has not been ordained by him, where we know that Satan, being the prince of the power of the air, will come to a terminal end, and he and the image and the beast and all the demons and all the evil forces will be cast into the lake of fire. So we are called, while there is still chance, to recognize the God of the universe, to surrender to him and worship him, the one who is the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords. Blessed be he. Shalom.